When Governor Greg Abbott signed Senate Bill 7 into law, he called it a win for election integrity. Cameras flashed, allies clapped, and headlines cheered from his echo chamber. But outside the governor's mansion, something was shifting. The bill, buried under bureaucratic language, slashed voting hours, stripped drive-through voting, and targeted black and brown communities with surgical precision. It wasn't reform, it was suppression with a signature. Jasmine Crockett had seen it before, laws dressed as order, cloaking injustice in legalese. But this one felt different. It wasn't just about a vote. It was about silencing people like her, people she came from, people who'd waited in lines for hours just to whisper their voice into democracy. And now, that voice was under attack. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't tweet a threat. She walked straight into a Texas town hall, stood before a room full of voters, and said, "They're hoping you'll sit down quietly. I came here to make sure you don't." The room fell still. Not out of fear, but recognition. Jasmine wasn't campaigning. She was warning. And unlike Abbott's smooth statements, hers came with scars. Stories. Names. "Your vote isn't just a ballot," she continued. "It's memory. It's legacy. And they're not just afraid of who you'll elect, they're afraid of who you'll become if you keep voting." A reporter in the back scribbled frantically. This wasn't standard stump talk. It was defiance wrapped in truth. Greg Abbott had the pen. Jasmine Crockett had the people. And when democracy's volume was turned down in ink, she came with a mic, and turned it all the way back up. Greg Abbott didn't respond directly to Jasmine's remarks. He didn't have to. His office released a 3-line statement: "Texas remains committed to secure elections. Those who disagree are free to run for office." It was sterile, smug, and cowardly. But Jasmine wasn't surprised. She'd learned long ago that power rarely yells, it just quietly writes people out of the process. While Abbott remained hidden behind polished wood desks and photo ops, Jasmine was in the streets, barbershops, churches, college campuses, telling voters exactly how they were being targeted. She wasn't asking for outrage. She was organizing it. In Houston, an elderly man grabbed her hand after a town meeting and whispered, "They think we're too tired to fight." Jasmine held his stare. "Then let's make them regret underestimating us." Her campaign wasn't red or blue, it was black, brown, working class, silenced, and rising. The more Abbott ignored her, the louder she got. And the louder she got, the more his silence looked like guilt. National media began paying attention. Headlines shifted. Crockett calls out voter suppression in Texas. Abbott under fire as new restrictions spark backlash. On The View, a co-host asked, "Is this law really about security?" Jasmine didn't blink. "If your security depends on fewer people voting, it's not democracy. It's control dressed up as patriotism." Behind closed doors, Abbott's team grew nervous. His press secretary advised limited exposure. "Don't mention her name. Don't engage. She wants a fight." But Jasmine didn't want a fight, she wanted a microphone. And she already had one. Because in the face of voter suppression, Jasmine Crockett didn't need permission to speak. She was the permission. And every voter she reached? Another voice Abbott couldn't shut out. It started with a leaked memo, an internal document from Abbott's administration analyzing early effects of the new voting law. The numbers were sharp and deliberate: drop-off in turnout in urban areas, polling locations cut in minority districts, provisional ballots rejected at nearly double the rate. The memo didn't read like a security report. It read like a playbook. And somehow, it landed on Jasmine Crockett's desk. She didn't leak it to the press, yet. First, she wanted to see how far they'd go in pretending it didn't exist. So she walked into the next legislative hearing holding the folder like a loaded weapon. "Governor Abbott says this is about security," she began, addressing the chamber. "I'd like to ask, whose security?" She opened the folder. "Because here's what your own numbers say, voter turnout in Harris County dropped 18%. Drive-through voting, gone. Souls to the polls? Cut in half. You didn't just suppress votes, you selected which voices mattered. Gasps echoed. Lawmakers shifted. One aide stepped out to make a call. Abbott wasn't in the room, but Jasmine wasn't speaking to him anymore. She was speaking through him, past him, to everyone he thought wouldn't notice. The real fraud, she continued, is pretending this law protects democracy. It protects seats. It protects silence. And it protects the fear you have of Texas becoming what it actually looks like. Outside, protesters gathered. Not with signs, yet, but with phones, with questions, with a pulse that was waking up. Jasmine didn't have a gavel. But in that moment, her voice was louder than one. She didn't shout. She didn't threaten. She just showed them what they'd written in ink, and read it back with fire. Governor Abbott finally responded, not to Jasmine directly, but on a national news segment. Calmly, with a politician's polish, he said, Texas is simply ensuring that only legal votes are counted. If Representative Crockett wants to debate that, she's welcome to visit the border, where chaos reigns. It was a deflection. A bait. And it reeked of desperation. Jasmine didn't take it lightly. At her next appearance, she stood before a packed community center in Dallas and played the clip on a projector. Then she turned to the crowd and asked, "Did you hear what he just did?" Heads nodded. He couldn't defend the numbers, so he changed the subject. From voter suppression to border security. From rights to fear. She walked across the stage slowly, not as a politician, but as a prosecutor. This isn't about laws anymore. It's about the soul of Texas. And Abbott wants you to believe that protecting democracy means silencing part of it. Applause broke out, then silence as she leaned in. "I'm not afraid of his Texas," she said. "Because I'm building something bigger. And it's not red or blue. It's not North Dallas or South Houston. It's the America that votes, the America that's rising, and the America that's done asking for permission to be heard." That clip went viral. On TikTok, a 22-year-old captioned it. "She's not running for office, she's running through lies." Greg Abbott had the governor's mansion. Jasmine Crockett had a movement. And in a battle between paper laws and people's voices, she was making sure every voice echoed louder than his power. It was supposed to be a quiet policy forum. No fireworks. No national headlines. Just a roundtable of lawmakers discussing electoral best practices at a downtown Austin university. Greg Abbott was scheduled to speak first, then leave. Jasmine Crockett wasn't even listed on the panel. But when she showed up, seated quietly in the back, whispers rippled across the room like static. She wasn't on the program. But she was now part of the story. And everyone knew it. Abbott took the stage and delivered his usual script: voter integrity, secure elections, and how the new law actually expands access. The audience nodded politely. Cameras captured him at just the right angles. He was almost done when he added, "Anyone who disagrees is free to file a lawsuit, but let's keep politics out of voting rights." That was it. Jasmine stood up, not yelling, not pointing. Just standing. "If you wanted to keep politics out of voting," she said, her voice cutting clean through the room, "you wouldn't have signed a law that surgically targets working-class communities." Abbott paused. The moderator tried to speak. Jasmine didn't flinch. "You talk about lawsuits. I talk about literacy tests. You talk about expanding access. I talk about cutting Sunday hours when black churches show up." The room was no longer neutral. Phones were recording. Abbott's smile thinned. "This law doesn't protect votes," she said. "It protects incumbents." No security stopped her. No official interrupted her. Because no one wanted to be the image that tried to silence the woman exposing voter suppression on camera. Abbott left through a side door. And Jasmine? She didn't need the podium. The room was already hers. In the days that followed, a new document leaked. It wasn't from a journalist or an aide, it came from a disillusioned consultant inside the Abbott campaign. A 12-page internal slide deck titled, "Retention over Risk, Minority Voter Patterns in Urban Texas." Jasmine read it twice. Not because it shocked her, but because it confirmed everything she'd said in public. Slide after slide broke it down: which neighborhoods had the most voter drop-off when polling hours were shortened, which districts were safely underparticipated, and even which zip codes responded poorly to ID verification. It wasn't voter integrity. It was voter math. Weaponized. She stood before the House Oversight Committee, gripping the document like evidence in a trial. "You want to know how suppression works," she said, eyes locked forward. "It doesn't march in with boots and tear gas anymore. It walks in wearing a suit, carrying a spreadsheet." The room shifted. Even Republicans looked uncomfortable. "This isn't about fraud," she continued. "It's about fragility. When power is scared, it counts on apathy. When voices rise, it rewrites the rules." Reporters outside huddled, waiting for a statement. But Jasmine didn't give one. She let the words hang where they belonged, on record. That night, Abbott's team claimed the document was misinterpreted research. But by morning, the headline had already landed. Crockett exposes internal plan to curb urban voting. Greg Abbott had silence. Jasmine had receipts. And Texas was beginning to notice the difference. Abbott finally agreed to appear on a live town hall broadcast. The topic: election policy and public trust. It was meant to be a safe appearance, a few softball questions, a calm audience, and no risk. What he didn't expect was Jasmine Crockett showing up uninvited, with a front row seat. The moderator opened the floor for questions. Jasmine didn't raise her hand. She stood up. The cameras shifted toward her instinctively. "Governor Abbott," she said, "you've called this law a safeguard. My question is simple: who exactly are you safeguarding Texas from?" Abbott froze for half a beat. Then smiled, condescending. "We're protecting voters from irregularities, Representative Crockett. Surely, you agree integrity matters." She stepped forward. "Integrity means truth. And truth means acknowledging that a law that closes polling places in communities like Oak Cliff, Fifth Ward, and East Austin isn't about safety, it's about silence." The moderator hesitated, but Jasmine continued. "Why does your law make it harder to vote in the very zip codes where working people live, where shift workers can only cast ballots late? Why did you remove ballot boxes but increase funding for voter fraud hotlines that find nothing?" Abbott shifted. His practiced calm gave way to agitation. "Texas has the right to." "To what?" Jasmine interrupted. "To cherry-pick democracy?" The audience murmured, then erupted into claps. Not because they were told to, but because someone finally said what they'd felt for months. Abbott didn't respond again. Because there's no rebuttal for receipts. And in a state that tried to shrink its voice, Jasmine Crockett was turning the mic into a megaphone. After the town hall clash, something shifted. Not in the polls, yet, but in the rhythm of Texas itself. Neighborhoods that hadn't seen political canvassers in years were buzzing. Barbershops turned into debate rooms. Church bulletins included voter registration dates. Jasmine hadn't just ignited a protest. She'd awakened an electorate. Meanwhile, Greg Abbott's team scrambled. Internal memos suggested avoiding direct engagement with Crockett, but it was too late. Her soundbites were everywhere. TikToks of her quotes hit 1 million views overnight. Billboards appeared in Houston and Dallas with her face and one line. Voting isn't dangerous. Silence is. Abbott gave one last press conference, trying to reclaim the narrative. Texas remains the beacon of secure elections, he said, stiffly. We will not be intimidated by political theatrics. But it rang hollow. Because while Abbott kept talking to cameras, Jasmine kept walking into rooms. She held roundtables with young voters in Denton, veterans in El Paso, single moms in Corpus Christi. And she didn't promise them change, she reminded them of their power to demand it. In one middle school gym, a teenager asked, "Do you really think we can stop them?" Jasmine crouched down, eye to eye. "I don't think. I know. Because they're already trying to stop you." And that was the truth Abbott couldn't bury. His law may have passed, but Jasmine had made sure no one missed who it tried to erase. In the heart of a state designed to forget its margins, she turned those margins into thunder. It all came to a head in federal court. A coalition of civil rights groups had sued the state of Texas over SB 7, and Jasmine Crockett, though not a named party, was called as a witness. Abbott's lawyers thought she'd deliver a speech. They were wrong. She delivered a legal dissection. On the stand, she didn't posture. She cited case law. She pointed to sections of the Voting Rights Act. She broke down how Section 5 once protected Texas from exactly this kind of overreach, until it was gutted. When asked why she believed the law was discriminatory, she didn't blink. Because intent isn't just what's written, it's what's removed. And this law removed every method working-class people used to cast a ballot. The judge leaned forward. Abbott's attorneys tried to object. "Speculative," one said. Jasmine smiled slightly. "It's not speculation if you have the data." And then she handed over the internal Abbott memo, the one with the maps, numbers, zip codes, and notes about turnout manipulation. The courtroom tensed. The judge took the folder. "This is public policy being designed in secret," Jasmine said. "This isn't voter protection. This is voter projection. You projected who you didn't want to vote, and you planned accordingly." The silence was surgical. Outside, reporters surged. One headline captured it perfectly. Abbott signed a law, Crockett put it on trial. And for the first time, it wasn't just activists calling for change. It was the courts, listening. The court didn't overturn SB 7 that day. Laws don't break like glass, they erode, piece by piece. But what happened in that courtroom cracked the facade. Texas hadn't passed a bill for protection. It passed it for control. And Jasmine Crockett had made the country see it. Abbott returned to the Capitol, visibly rattled. He issued no victory statement. His press team canceled all media appearances for the week. In private, one advisor was overheard saying, "We underestimated her. Badly." Meanwhile, Jasmine didn't celebrate. She organized. At a rally outside the courthouse, she took no podium. No flags. No fanfare. Just her voice, and a crowd ready to echo it. This wasn't just about SB 7, she told them. It's about every quiet trick they pull when we stop looking. Every district they redraw in silence. Every polling place they close and every lie they sell with the word patriotism. She paused. You want to scare people like Greg Abbott? Don't just protest, vote. Don't just vote, bring 10 more. And don't wait for justice. Be the reason they run from it. The roar was deafening. Not because she told them what to believe, but because she reminded them of what they already knew. That night, CNN ran a split screen, Abbott walking briskly out of the Capitol, avoiding questions, Jasmine Crockett walking slowly through a crowd, shaking hands, staying late. He had the power of office. She had the authority of truth. And in Texas, that truth was just getting started. You can write laws. You can rig maps. You can silence rooms. But you can't erase a voice that refuses to whisper. Jasmine Crockett didn't need permission to speak, she was the permission. In a state where power tried to redraw the rules in permanent ink, she walked in with a highlighter. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She told the truth, and made the lie blink first. Greg Abbott may still hold the pen. But Jasmine holds the people. And in a battle between suppression and conviction, Texas just witnessed what happens when silence meets resistance: live, unfiltered, and unstoppable.